If everyone will be seated, we'll call the meeting to order, please. Thank you. Now, if you'd stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, seeing we're missing one director, but we do have a quorum. And the first order of business is the February 23rd, 2023 Governing Board regular minutes. And are there any changes or corrections to those? Okay, seeing none, they will stand as written. All right, I do think we do have a couple people here from the torch class, so if you would just raise your hand, let us recognize you. Thanks for coming. Okay, 4.0 is the report, so we have a report from Director Rhodes.
We do. The February 2023 financials have been reviewed and accepted by the Budget and Finance Committee, and they've been filed.
Okay. Any questions about that for Dick? No, okay. Moving right along, new business. Brian Wallace, would you come up and give us a recap of the 2022-23 election? Brian is a former director, and he was in charge of our election committee this year.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is on, I guess? Okay, I can't tell from here, okay. Thank you. The election committee met 3 times this year, once in October, once in December, and January of 2022. 2023. The late start was a result of the chairman not being selected until late in the game. So 4 members picked packets for the election committee. 3 petitioners returned the packets and were certified as candidates for the governing board election. With 4 director positions open, it was determined that no election would be necessary. The committee discussed and revised its internal processes by creating a second category of member, and that is a petitioner, to complement the existing category of a candidate. Petitioners would be those members who collect signatures with the intention of becoming candidates. The information provided to petitioners would be drastically reduced from, what is this, approximately 80 pages, down to this, which is about 10 pages. Not only does it cover all the material and information necessary for the petitioners to do to collect their signatures, but it's also a much less intimidating introduction to the process for people that are coming in and want to become members of the board. So the committee removed the redundant details of the petitioning activities from the candidate packet. This will be the new candidate packet, which will be handed to those people who qualify as candidates by turning in at least 200 signatures. The committee confronted the issue of petitioners regarding or disregarding the written and verbal rules of the petitioning. The limitations that are provided in writing and also verbally were violated. The election committee issued an email reminding petitioners that if the violations are reported and the committee can clearly identify those signatures, that those sheets would be disregarded. We found that having a rule and not having any way to enforce it means that what you really have is just a guideline or a recommendation. So we found a way to make sure that it was clear that there were consequences of people who violated the petitioning limits. The committee determined that there was no tangible benefit to petitioners or members in during the phase of the election process of gathering petition information. So we recommend that the future election committees follow this practice as well. That is, not publicizing the number of active petitioners or their names. The committee had discussed that over the past 6 years, there's been a waning interest in people running for the board. A recommendation that we felt consideration was worthwhile to present was to have either a current or a past director present the benefits of running for the governing board to the Fall Torch Committee. I don't know if this is done now, but we wanted to make sure that it was there. It just so happens that 2 of the 3 candidates that have come from this year's Torch Committee, in this fall's Torch Committee. The election directors are extremely important activity by which we seat the leaders of the committee, seat the members in directors on the board in the coming year. It's clear governing boards have put a lot of effort into creating voluminous material, which in support of the bylaws and the policies regarding elections. And as I said before, having rules without any consequences make them nothing more than guidelines. So in summary, the election committee got a late start. The committee members worked smoothly and quickly to make up the time. Careful consideration of the proposed changes to create the new petitioner status and separate the documents for petitioners from candidates was made. Though there was an insufficient number of candidates to fill the 4 open director positions and no election, committee has confidence that the 3 resulting candidates will serve the membership with distinction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, excuse me, 5.02, update on the parking lot security cameras. Director Davidson?
Yes. So as a result of recent thefts of catalytic converters in the parking lot, Facilities has put up cameras at the administrative building that face the east parking lot. I think that's the east, correct, Russ? Okay. Basically from where HR entrance is to the Fry's parking lot. So I met with Dave Kingery in accounting. He has the monitor for the cameras at his desk, and that stays on. And they were able to catch somebody pulling up was the Sunday before, not this past Sunday, that they pulled up, got out, 20 seconds later, they had the converter in the car and off they went. So it's not exactly going to make it easy to be able to catch these people, but they did download the video and it has been turned over to the sheriff's office. So there are the signs up, Russ? Yes, the signs are up that warn people that there is video surveillance. It's a deterrent. It's not necessarily going to stop anybody. But I think as members of the community, if you see somebody pulling up in a strange position in a parking lot, they're probably not up to any good. And it might help with your cell phone, not you going after the person, to dial 911, even though they'll be gone before the sheriff could get there. But it's important that I think as a community that our eyes and ears are available, and that's the only way you're going to stop this is continually monitor what's going on. So, like I said, this is more of a deterrent than preventing it, but it's a first step, and I thank the administration for that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Roberta? Okay, moving right along. We have several committee recommendations that are going to be presented, but before we do, I just want to give a little background. All of our standing committees act as liaisons between the board and the public. And there's been a lot of discussion lately on credit card fees. It's gotten to be a very significant portion of our expenses. And both the B&F Committee and the Golf Committee were presented a proposal, or actually it was more of a fact-finding time, about whether or not credit card fees could be passed along to the golf and to membership. I also want to say that all of our standing committees carry the same weight. They're all individuals, and they all have the same ability to recommend to the governing board what they do. So with that, Director Stenenbein, you have your recommendation?
Yes. Thank you, President Hurley. Our committee met, and a majority of the golf committee recommended that credit card fees for golf pro shop transactions not be passed on to golfers. In addition to the already proposed $1 increase per round for resident play during October through May, the golf committee recommended an additional $1 increase per round for resident play for the entire calendar year. No rate increase above $7 per round increase for outside play or golf credit pass along fees for outside players were recommended.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Are there any questions from the directors? Roberta?
So why were the outside players exempt from this?
Harry, you want to answer that?
Yes. The discussion was that the outside players was a $7 increase, which was equivalent to the $1 increase of member play. And as one of the speakers spoke, one of the attendants at our meeting spoke, who had been on the golf committee previously, made the statement that we got to be careful because the outside play brings in $2 million a year to this community. And you don't get the $2 million divided by our residents, and that's a pretty good sized dues increase. So we want to be careful that we don't price ourselves out of that realm. And the dollar number given was, we'd better make sure we keep it at the $90 range, or we're going to start chasing away a lot of money. And with the $7 increase, the cost of the golf cart, we're going to be right at the $90. If you add the credit card fee, you're now up to $92. And that's not, we're going to start probably chasing our people away. So just for the previous comments was that, $90 is a good number. And the rest of the committee, as they spoke, everybody got to talk, everybody gave their opinion before I spoke. And their opinion was, we don't want to nickel and dime the people. Let's just increase a round of golf because our golf courses are very good. It's a good place, and $1 a round shouldn't make that much difference.
Okay. Ann?
Are we kind of discussing this? Are we going to vote or?
No, these are just recommendations that are coming to the board, but we do have an opportunity to understand how the recommendations came about.
Okay, can I?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, and Harry, I appreciate what your committee did. I watched your meeting on YouTube and listened to your discussion. What concerns me is right now the credit card fees, I believe, are in the range of about 2.65%. Is that correct, Cliff? Okay. When I look at the fees and adding $1 on for the residents, only the 18-hole resident in the November through April is going to approach when we add $1 on. If we add $1 on at the regulation 18-hole, that's 2.32% added. At the $39 on an executive, it's 2.56. Everything else below that is adding to our resident at $1, well over 3 to 5% of their cost to play golf. And I know $1 doesn't sound like much, but if you talk about nickel and diming, we are going to nickel and dime our golf playing residents, which most of them are not going to be playing. A lot of them are going to be playing on Kachina or Coyote, or they're going to have annual rate that they pay. but our residents are going to bear this to bring in outside play. Now, I understand the importance of outside play, but what I'm concerned about is this is a golf community for our residents. And I just think raising our residents, for instance, if you're going to play 18 holes on a Coyote card, you're going to be raising them over 3% to cover that in the November through April. If you're playing on an executive, it's going to be about 3.5%. So I think those percentages are a little out of line for what our residents are going to have to pay. I appreciate passing on that cost, but I think not every one of our residents is going to use a credit card, but they're going to pay for it anyway. And our guests, if they want to use a credit card, I think it's becoming common practice to add credit card fees on at a lot of places. And if that's posted, people will know about it. So that's just my feeling.
Okay, just one point of clarification, and Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the golf committee prior to this had already approved the dollar rate from October through April, right? What they proposed was an additional fee year-round to pay for the credit card
I
fee.
thought the additional fee was only in October through April. Is that,
What it is year-round, there'll be a dollar.
oh, it'll be year-round. Oh, that's even a higher percentage then, because I was looking at November through April, which are the high dollar months. And if you take somebody like me who's playing Super Twilight on an executive course, that's going to add 5% to my cost. It's $1, but it's still a higher percentage.
Okay,
Thank you.
any other comments? Harry?
I just did a quick calculation, and if we lose outside play, every person's dues will go up $70. If we lost $2 million, your dues would go up $70 a year. So, yes, the people that play 150 rounds of golf will see a higher number, but the 75 or 70% of the people that don't play any golf will also experience the $70 increase.
Okay, thank you. Director Rhodes, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I do. I actually have several. The first one is, and this was submitted to the governing board about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we talked about it at the workshop. The first recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee is an increase the assessment, the asset preservation fees from $4,200 to $4,700, and to adjust the projected sales to 1,014 for the APF transfers. So, and that was a unanimous recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay, and I believe that that's already been incorporated into the budget?
Into the proposed, yes.
The proposed budget, yes.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on that recommendation? All right, Dick, go ahead.
Our second recommendation is to include a credit card transaction fee of 2.65% on all credit card transactions within the community. And that was also a unanimous recommendation from all of the members of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Questions? Okay, go ahead.
The third recommendation from the Budget and Finance Committee was an increase in recreation dues. They acknowledged that there was a need for the increase in recreation dues. Consensus could not be reached on the recommended dues increase. However, after discussion, a range between 3.5% and 5% increase from the current $509 was unanimously agreed upon.
Questions on this recommendation? Okay, proceed.
And then the fourth recommendation, I would like to make some comments before I read it. The Budget and Finance Committee had should we say, a robust discussion regarding this. I want to echo Director Hurley's comments that we in the Budget and Finance Committee recognize that there is no hierarchy in the committees, and that we are a recommending body, and it is the governing board that has the ultimate authority to make the decision. So the recommendation that I'm going to read is really a validation of our first recommendation. It would actually have been the recommendation number 2 for the credit card transaction fees. And this is going to sound a little harsh. It isn't intended to be that way. It was just because we have due respect for our colleagues in the Golf Committee. In response to the recommendation by the Golf Committee to refrain from charging credit card fees in lieu of increased golf rates, the Budget and Finance Committee does not endorse nor recommend approval, and that was also a unanimous position from all of the members in the Budget and the Finance Committee. So it's really a validation of what we had already submitted.
Okay. Questions or comments? Okay. We are going to move right along to a discussion of the proposed 23-24 budget draft, latest revisions. CFO Cliff Swan.
Tim, if I may, prior to Mr. Swan's presentation,
Absolutely.
I just want to give a shout out to our finance team, Terry and Cliff, Mr. Finelli, Carl, and everyone involved, our staff, putting together what we feel is a very well-structured budget in, I think, some pretty tough economic times. And I think you're going to see some things presented in this budget that are somewhat awakening, but they're also put together, I think, in a very structured way that I think the ownership, the owner members here can be very proud of. So Cliff, if you don't mind, and I think for continuity, I think we're going to look at like 25 slides, and if we could get all questions held to the end for continuity purposes, it just flows a heck of a lot better. So we're here to answer any and all questions. And then I do want to recommend and make folks aware that a couple of public forums are coming up in April. I believe it's the 12th and the 13th. So we hope to have a very good budget packet with direction from the governing board kind of wrapped up and pushing forward down those trails for the general public to be able to get a good couple of presentations going in mid-April. So Cliff, with that, Tim, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I do have one question. Besides lowering the APF volume to 1,014, were there any other recommendations that you just heard implemented into the proposed budget?
The only changes from this budget that's being presented today and the budget that was presented 2 weeks ago to this board is an update in the projection with February actual numbers. So, and then on the budget, that changes the year-over-year percentages and amounts a little bit. And then we adjusted the golf rounds down by the difference in year-over-year for February, which is roughly 2,500 rounds.
So the credit card recommendation is not in here.
The credit card recommendation was in the last one, and it's in this one, and it's in at the original proposed from B&F. So I will always present what comes out of B&F with the proposal to this board.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Okay, so just high level. I'm going to high level go over the budget presentation. I want to keep this quick so that we can get into discussion. But overall, 8% after the new projected update for February. So that changed a little bit. 1.3 million increase over prior year. Again, just want to highlight those labor challenges that we're dealing with and we have to address in this budget. So the labor increase is $904,000. There were some questions that we received from Director Hurley, and we wanted to address some of those questions in this presentation. So if one of the questions that came out of this committee was, how is our labor mix affected by this increase, meaning by employee pay type? So we have four employee pay types. We have salaried employees, we have hourly full-time employees, hourly part-time employees, and minimum wage employees. So when you take the increase from the proposed 3.5% merit increase and the dollar per hour estimated minimum wage increase, that $904,000 is distributed to these employee pay types accordingly. So salary at 23% of that $900,000, hourly 46%, hourly full-time, hourly part-time at 9%, and minimum wage at 22%. So 22% of the $900,000 is attributable to that minimum wage increase. Again, highlighting the FTE 10-year trend. Last year in budget, fiscal year 23 budget, we proposed 291 FTEs. This year we're proposing 293 FTEs. So when we take those seats and FTEs, I presented last committee meeting, the last board meeting, we presented the distribution of the seats to the different divisions and FTEs. So now let's break that out into the different employee pay types that we talked about earlier. So we have 43 salaried seats, which those are one-for-ones. So that's 43 FTEs in this budget attributable to salaried employees. We've got 157 full-time hourly employees, and those are one-for-one as well. So 157 FTEs attributable to that. Now, when we look at our part-time hourly employees, we have 118 part-time hourly positions and 43 FTEs associated with those part-time hourly employees are in this budget. And then when we look at the minimum wage employees, 163 of those positions equate to a 50 FTE impact on our budget. So 293 FTEs are distributed in this way. I will note that the 118 part-time hourly and 163 minimum wage positions, over 80% of that comes from this community of those employees. Now, if we look at the fiscal year 24 versus fiscal year 23, one of the questions we received was, yes, it's a 2 FTE increase, but you got some movement in some different divisions, so I wanted to break that out to give some more clarity into that. So when we look at administration, there's a 1-person FTE increase in administration. In golf maintenance, we have a 6-person increase in FTEs year over year for the budgets. And then in recreation, we have a 5-person decrease. And then in golf ops and sports pavilion, we're flat year over year on the recommended FTEs in this budget. So those FTE changes, so that one administrative add is came from an organizational restructuring that we did this year, in this calendar year, and we added a reserve study analyst. That person is responsible for the asset management and cash reserve fund investments, which is really at the end of the day, it's the basis for how we budget and how we operate. So we found that position was needed, and there are communities that have this position, and what they do is they pay a consulting firm to do that, and it's very expensive, and we feel like that this is a position we can do at an economical rate compared to that. So we added that position in this budget. Looking at golf maintenance, there are 6 added FTEs. So in talking with Todd and his team, they're trying to get back to normal staffing levels. Their FTEs at one point in time were, Todd had 130 golf maintenance people. We've got 86 in this budget, but we're trying to get him at least to a point where he can continue to provide the service levels that he's providing, and also to take that burden off his existing staff for all those labor shortages, because they become inefficient, and not only they become inefficient, they become inefficient at a time and a half rate, which is not as productive as we would like. So we need to get him back up to where it's an acceptable level, and addressing that labor shortage. So in the recreation area, we reduced 5 FTEs. We did that 3.5 of those is really more of a shift in expense. We were having trouble hiring this after-hour janitorial services. These people come in after the facilities are closed at 9 o'clock and clean at night, and just a really difficult position to hire. So we've put some money in the budget, took it out of the wages bucket and put it in outside services bucket so that we can get the facilities cleaned here in the evenings when people aren't here. And so that was really a shift in expense, but it did reduce the FTEs. And then 1.5 to 2 person reduction in landscape maintenance workers. Again, unfilled positions for a long time, and talking with Todd, could use those people in the golf maintenance area. So we shifted those up in the golf maintenance area. And then the details since fiscal year 2015 on the FTEs. So I just provided this for context, but that's in here. Another question we see from this board is health insurance, and they wanted to see what our health insurance has increased, the increases in health insurance. I think just to provide some more context into what we're dealing with. So you can see that from 20 to 21, a modest 2.5% increase, and then here we go after COVID, 14.4, 27.6, and budgeting 15%. And this really is flat out, our claims are exceeding 1.5 times last year what our premiums are, and that is impacting our health insurance, and that's that's something we have to deal with. But benefits is a big part of our how we promote and hire people. So this expense is very important to our employees and important to how we do what we do, but it is increasing, and it is a significant number. So after those changes from the prior year, here's a summary of our operating expenses by category. Overall, 3% increase, and all of these numbers are just summarized in this presentation. However, in the budget packet attached to this presentation are the details and the divisional details of what these are. Credit card processing fees, a lot of talk. So, I think at the end of the day, I think we're talking about this because we're looking for ways that we can, at the end of the day, put more money into our reserve fund. And how do we do that? Well, we either do that through revenue or expense. That's all. That's how that happens. It's either a reduction in expense or an increase in funding or revenues. So this is one area that kind of started in the Budget and Finance Committee. It started a year ago when we presented, hey, just a heads up, we've got $500,000 in credit card fees. And people just started asking questions like, we have $500,000 in credit card fees? Really? Is that an expense that we need to continue to absorb as an association, or is there something that we can do? So that's how all of this discussion started on credit card fees from a presentation a year ago in this budget presentation. So, here we are. So we're looking at ways, and the committees and the board are looking at ways that maybe we can avoid that cost. So, and then what all that does is it directly puts that cost avoidance of up to $500,000 per year, it puts that in the reserve fund. So, and that's a good thing. So, we'll continue to talk about it. Either they get absorbed and the dues get increased to cover them, or we come up with a way to maybe avoid that cost. So looking at the surrounding communities when it comes to, I'm going to call it a convenience fee, a payment convenience fee, a processing fee. If we look at the communities around us, you'll see that Pebble Creek, the Grand, and Sun City Festival all charge that convenience fee to their members when it comes to paying their member dues. Okay, so that's what they're doing. They're not passing the fees on to their golfers, but they are passing them on to in the membership area, and so that's what they're doing. And then Sun City essentially absorbs the credit card fee, except they charge a 3.5% for their event tickets only. But that's what the surrounding communities are doing. These recommendations were talked about earlier, but these are the two main recommendations that have come from our two main committees in this budget surrounding credit card fees and how to address them. So if we look at the impact of credit card fees, however we get there, whether it's hard to estimate how many people will continue to use credit cards, because people will, because they like the convenience. And if we implement a fee, it'll just be an offset. So, but the year-over-year impact will be $500,000 to this budget. And if we pass those fees on at a 2.65% rate as a convenience fee, and we will budget approximately $60,000 for bank fees. And we did some research on the check cost and the ACH fee, and they're $1 to $2 depending on what they are. And then we'll also have to probably chase down some bad checks, some mostly not intentional, wrote on old accounts or whatever, closed accounts or not properly filled out. So there'll be some costs there. We've got that at $60,000 in the budget. Still hard to determine what that cost will be. And then as well as just processing cash. It's very labor intensive, cash is. Okay, so the summary of the revenues, I put that in here because we did have some changes with the projected 23, so they are here, and a 6% revenue increase. Overall, we've got $27.9 million in revenue to operate our $27.9 million association and expenses, and this is how they break out by category. So when we look at the surrounding communities, and when we talk about dues increases, I presented this slide last time. I put it in here again because two reasons. One, I have to adjust Sun City Festival. I had that at the wrong percentage. It is 10%. Okay. So, but the other reason is to highlight the fact that this is what's going on in our industry, and this is impacting us, and it's impacting our competition and our peers. So, 6 to 10% increase at all of these other communities that are similar to us, and I would argue we provide a lot more for the dues that we collect here. So 6 to 10%. Bill found this. He's always good at finding this stuff, and he found this survey that was done by retirebetternow.com, and what they did is they had a 10 best retirement communities in 2022, and they ranked communities throughout the country, and we're on that list. Now, they didn't rank them 1 to 10, but they just said, here's the top 10. So we're still in the process of really drilling into this, but we're trying to get some data from these different communities, how big they are, how old they are, how many amenities they have, what your fees are, what your APFs would be if you moved in, those types of things. So we're data gathering right now, but some information that I do have that I could share with you is what their dues are. So when we look at those top 10 communities from retirebetternow.com, here they are. And we saw them on the map, but here they are listed. And here's what their dues are. So you can see, we're currently at 509. And then, Sun City, Texas is at 768. And if you get down to Laguna Woods Village, I believe that's in California, you might have a nice ocean view there, but that's, yeah, is it? But, we can't give the ocean view, but, you're getting a really good value, at 509. In fact, you're in bargain territory. And that's just context to what your dues, how much they are compared to competition throughout, and then competition that's measured by other communities. That's where we are. All right, so let's switch gears to golf. So the recommendation from golf, the last time I presented this was at B&F, and we had the recommendation from golf in there from Harry and his team, and then we came back out of that committee. As I said, I'm always going to present to this board what's recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee. So I did change that back to the original proposal, which was the 742 and then the dollar rate increase, all during peak and transition seasons for our members and our non-members. Okay, and the numbers changed a little bit just because of the year-over-year projection, but that's what that 8% increase. So to be clear, the credit card fees for golf, the processing fees are in this budget, and the original fees that were proposed are in this budget that's being presented today. So we had some questions from this committee also about rounds, and this is great debate and discussion, and I'm glad we're talking about it because we can talk about the increases in the rates and all these things, but they are tied to rounds, and at the end of the day, that is tied to revenue. So if we look at we've had a couple of great years in golf rounds, at 2021 being 326,000 rounds, and 2022 333,000 rounds. So this year we're seeing a decrease. Right now through February, we are 10,000 plus rounds off from that 333 prior year. Right now, as we speak through February, and we lost roughly the last 2 days. We got some ground to make up over the last 2 days. Now we had some rainouts probably last March. I didn't look at it, but at the end of the day, these impact us. When we have during peak season, when we have a complete washout, that's 50,000 in revenue to this community when that happens. 7 golf courses, it's big dollars. So when that happens, we can't control Mother Nature. So if that happens, it's significant. But when we look at our rounds for the 5-year average, 2015 to 2019, before COVID, okay, 2019 has some COVID in it, but we have a split year, unfortunately. But we averaged 291,000 rounds during those years, and then the makeup of those rounds are listed on this table. So for the 3 years, 2020 through 2022, we averaged roughly 314,000 rounds. And currently, there are 323,000 rounds in this budget. Okay, I'm a numbers guy, finance guy, and we talked about this reserve fund allocation, and I was talking to Director Hurley about it, and he said, you explained what it was, but you didn't really explain why, and let's talk about the why. So the why do we now have this line item called reserve fund allocation? Well, we flat out, there's this perception out there that inflow from operations is profit, because it looks like profit when you look at a financial statement. I was in the for-profit world my whole career before I came here, and that was always profit to me. So I can see why that appears to be profit. It's not. Okay, it's not profit, but it appears that way. So essentially what we do every year is we present a balanced budget, and the money that's left over goes into our reserve fund. So let's call that out for what it is, and that's what we're doing. So why are we doing this? We're to eliminate the perception of profit. We're emphasizing the fact that per policy, our own policy stated, it says reserve funds from associations operating, reserves are funded from the association's operating cash flow determined using the association's annual audited financial statements. So we're calling that out so it's clearer for our community. Also, we're identifying the amount needed in the reserve fund to pay for repair and replacement, as well as new capital improvements, and stay within the FFP % per policy. Okay, that's what we're doing. So this allows us to do that better, and that's why we're doing it. So this current proposed budget has a 4.13% increase in dues. So the current rate is $509. The 4.1% generates another $21 and takes the dues from $509 to $530 per year. So the modeling impact of that, the budget impact puts us at roughly a 49% FFB, and then by year 2028, fiscal year 2028, it puts us at a 51% FFB percent. So you can look at that reserve fund allocation. What's coming from operations is on that line item called reserve fund allocations. And so we're 1.7 to 1.9 million over the next 5 years get allocated to our reserve fund calculation. Historically, that's been 2 to 2.3 million per year for the past 10 years. So we're falling a little bit behind on that reserve fund allocation coming from operations right now. And that's simply inflation. I mean, it's just killed us for the past 2 years. It really has. And so, we have to address that. And, we're trying to get healthy on that reserve fund allocation. This budget does that. And then, so I talk about the funding sources of the reserve fund. If you look at them in total, we've got 3 main funding sources. It's 95% of our funding comes from membership, golf, and APFs. Okay? That funding has to pay for our operations and our capital spend. So how to operate this place, salaries and wages, everything. That's paid for from these fundings, as well as our reserve capital spend, the repair and replacement of the assets that are in this association, as well as new capital projects that come up every year. And that's modeled out here. So that's what our 3 main funding sources. If you put them all together, they pay for operations and our capital spend, keeping this place looking nice. So had a request from Budget and Finance to model out the 5.1% increase, which would be an additional $5. So taking the dues from $5.09 to $5.35. And I wanted to call out that impact of that $5 increase. So you can see the first year, not much of an impact at $68,000, but 142, 147, 152, and 157 over time of that $5. And then if you add that all together, that's a significant impact to our reserve fund. So $500,000 moves our reserve fund, our FFB percent, by 1%. So it's if we're able to generate that, we can move our FFB percent by 1%. And then at 3.5%, this would be a reduction in the current proposed budget. You can see those reduction amounts in the dues adjustment line item at the top, and what that does to the FFB percent as we move through fiscal year 2028. So that $3 decrease in the proposed amount from 530 to 527 drops the FFB percent down to 50.7. So I talked to Karen, and she said, these modeling, this modeling stuff's all great, but you got to have like a summary of this to make it more consumable. And she's right. So I put this summary together to try and summarize what's in those modeling scenarios in a one page to give you the impact. So the 4.1, the 5.1, and the 3.5 are there. So you could see what the impact of those are to the actual reserve fund. So you see what the reserve fund allocation impact is on those. You see what the total reserve fund balance is on those. And you see the FFB percent. I added to the bottom of that the credit card fees. And the credit card fees are our 2 major divisions where the credit card fees come from. So they come from membership and they come from golf. So you could see that 300 and 250,000 modeled out at a 4% increase year over year is the impact in that budget. Okay? So if you decided to maybe say, you know what, we can do it membership, we're not going to do it in golf, you could see what the impact of that would be at 300,000 per year, so you versus 500,000 per year. Keeping in mind that $500,000 moves the FFB percent by 1%. That's it.
All right, we have some questions from the directors. Director Rhodes?
Cliff, would you go back to one of your scenarios, one of the 3.5 or 5.1, any one of them?
Okay, do you want to see this, or do you want to see the model?
I want to point something out on
Okay, yes.
right there.
Okay.
Far right-hand corner. Assumptions. So one of the things that I want to validate from you is, actually, if you go to the 4.1 for me,
Okay.
please. I said any of them then, but that's not the one I want.
Yeah. Hey, I'm used to it.
So one of the things that I want to point out, and I want you to validate for me, is that even with a 4.1% increase, $21, for the ensuing years, all of those things have to happen on the right. We have to go from a
correct.
3 to a 3.5% increase in dues. We have to go to a 4% increase. I mean, all of those.
Yes.
So if none of that happens, or if it only happens in a partial sense, it's not going, we're not going to see these numbers. And if we fall short of it, that means that we're going to fall short in what we're going to put into our reserve account.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and now I want to go up to the $500,000 that we talk about credit cards. That may not necessarily go into our reserve account. That very well could go into expenses. And so it will help offset. It would give us enough money to help us offset any increase in dues.
Yes, it could. Yes.
Okay, so.
So what ends up happening is you reduce expenses. It increases your inflow from operations, which flows directly into your reserve fund allocation. Correct.
So it's not just as simple as increasing the dues. There are other factors that would be involved in that.
Yes. So there's kind of two schools of thoughts on credit card fees. There's credit card fees are a cost of doing business. You increase your rates to cover them. Or you pass those fees on and have savings in your rates. That's the two schools of thoughts on it. I mean, and you're in one or the other camp, essentially.
Thank you.
Bill? Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're not done with questions.
No, I know that. Shoot, really? Meeting adjourned. No. I just want to talk about a couple of things in assembling this budget and moving forward. There's a couple of philosophical things I think we need to discuss, and whether that gets handled here or maybe down the road with more committee assessments, and after this budget gets finalized, where are we going? But this is my fourth go-round assembling the annual budget here, and we struggle this time of year all the time when we talk about annual dues. It's a very sensitive subject, I get it. And for years and years and years, when we put this budget together, we're very aware, I think, politically, of where the governing board sits and so when we put these fundings together, we know if we start applying some of the funding that we feel is desperately needed, it's never going to get passed because there is an impasse when it comes to the philosophical belief as to where our annual fees are and what should we charge. It's sensitive. I get it. We all get it, and that's kind of why we're here today. Terry, I don't know if you have the ability to put up that addended slide that we kind of put together, but I just want to share with you a couple of things that we're dealing with. And I think Mr. Rhodes brought up the three key points that we're still kind of trying to hone in on and struggle with. And that is, a way to raise money for the general fund and the reserve fund are the APF fees. That's big, right? We sell homes here, and that generates a lot of money and a good resource for us for future development as far as needs go when it comes to the reserve study. This is something that we've kind of put together, assessing, what things actually cost us, right? The Consumer Product Index. So going back several years, we're looking at what our annual dues actually were. And we kind of have a graph that shows sometimes we don't charge any increases at all in our annual dues, but the cost of products that we buy rise. And so that affects us. And so it's this graph that kind of goes from here to there, and it's difficult, and it becomes very political as far as that goes. But this is a scientific method that we'd like to really establish as potentially a guideline for us to how we deal with fees. Consumer Product Index last year was 9.1%. I think we came to the governing board with a 6% increase in annual fees, or recommended, and 2.1 was approved.
5.6 and 2.4.
Okay, so my analogy on that one is if we were in an airplane that nose is pointing this way. Scenic for a little while, but eventually you're going in the wrong direction. So we want to make sure that, the fully funded balance, our reserve study, is the critical link as far as management goes moving forward. We want to make sure down the road, looking long-sighted, that these facilities remain as nice as they are, if not better than they are today. Sun City West is a beautiful community, but it takes resources and planning to make that happen. These are 40 years old, and they look new. Thanks to the people in the back row making all this work happen, and the funding that the governing board provides us is great, right? So APF fees, credit card fees, and our annual dues are what we're kind of locked up in right now. And so I want to talk a little bit about credit card fees, and I have a different take on it. I love our committees. I mean, I want to just say that the work that they put in, the thought processes that come out of those conferences that we kind of hear the owner members talk, is great stuff. It's probably one of my favorite meetings of the week, because you really get to hear and get immediate feedback as to what's up. And so the recommendations brought forward are very, very good. And again, it's more of a philosophical take on where we're going. But when prior to Cliff and prior to Pete on board, Tim D'Angelo was in our finance department, and we were having issue on credit card fees 4 years ago. And at that point in time, we were looking at about a $300,000 hit to the association. And, I'm talking about, well, let's go to the bank and talk. Can we get these fees reduced? What can we do? And based on a $25 million ownership that we have here, as far as the revenues that we generate, you are so far back in line talking to the banks that generate millions and millions and millions of dollars. We don't even rank, right? So the fees that bank charges are what they are. There's really not a whole heck of a lot we can do as far as that goes. Katie and her team have been doing a tremendous job pushing forward our portals, making the convenience factor what they are today, and it's increased the use of credit cards along the way. Not being short-sighted, I think we as a country are moving away from cash. That's obvious, right? People just use credit cards for the benefits that you get, whether it's cash back, whether it's miles on airplanes, whether it's gasoline, anything else. You're getting a benefit from the use of your cards. It's a convenient thing. It truly, truly helps us at the pro shops for a quick and convenient in and out to make sure people are getting on the golf course and doing things. We don't have to have a bunch of staff members counting cash, the risk involved, and all that kind of stuff. So credit card fees are here, and they're going to stay. But we've absorbed those into our annual dues and our golf fees for the last several years, decades, right? And we've also increased golf fees along the way. So golfers along the way have been paying for credit card fees, essentially, to offset the operational costs in golf for a very long time. And that's getting, I think, to a critical point. I think Harry mentioned it. When you start pricing people out, there are other options. Those are discretionary funds. Those are discretionary uses of your time and money. So when we start getting ourselves priced in a range where maybe I can go golf somewhere else cheaper, that's a concern to us. So my take on it is a little different than the recommendations you maybe have heard on that. And that is, we've been absorbing this fee for years. And the increase that we're projecting in credit card fees from what the banks charged us this fiscal year to next is about a $50,000 increase, pushing us up to close to $600-ish thousand. So that $50,000 increase, if that were passed along inside our annual member dues, is $1.79, right? On top of the $5.09. So you saw what other communities are paying. And we are still way, way, way below at bargain level, according to Cliff, right? We're still way, way below. And I know it's a sensitive subject, but that's really what annual dues and membership dues are all about. Bank fees are an operational expense to us, just like electricity is. If APS raises their rates and the ARC building with a standalone meter and the metal shop with a standalone meter now have their power bills jump, we're not knocking on their door asking them for money like we do golf, right? It's absorbed into the overall membership of the association. And that's just one philosophical thing that I think I just want to express here as the general manager to see governing board and moving forward how we really want to handle this. Because again, owner members are paying for it either way, right? They're going to pay for it with their percentage that we're going to assess them at the time of using the card, or in a, I think, a cheaper and more, I hate to use the word, Dick, I'm sorry, fair way is to spread that wealth amongst all of the members. Because if you golf 2 or 3 times a week and you use those cards, you're paying a lot more money, a couple $100 more in membership, really, than anyone who's not golfing. And there are a lot of people that don't swim, and we don't charge them for chlorine. We don't, just because you get your, you dive in the pool doesn't cost you any more than not diving in the pool. It's a shared expense. And I just want to throw that out there for the board maybe to consider. I know increasing annual dues is a sensitive subject. I said that. But I really think it's time maybe to consider that. Thank you.
Just to be clear, are you saying increase it above what he has modeled?
Increase what, sir?
The dues
Yes. Yes.
to what?
So if I would say that if we're going, it depends. Are we talking about covering the fees for the whole association for credit card fees, or are we talking about covering the fees for membership only? Because golf has already increased rates enough to cover fees over the last 3 years. So I guess it would just depend on which.
Well, what I just heard, Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that his position is against passing on credit card fees, that it's a cost of doing business, and that it should continue to be absorbed. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, my question to you would be, what did the CPI do last year?
So we finished the year. In June it was 9.1 when we did the budget. So 9.1. When we finished the year, it was 8.1, I believe. So that's what CPI did last year.
So if you track our budget versus the CPI, our budget has gone up. All right, our wages have gone up.
Correct.
Just about what the CPI did, but it follows a year. It lags a year.
Mm-hmm.
So should we be considering a 6% increase?
Yes, and here's how I'll explain it. I mean, really, here's what it is. Because if we look historically, I talk about that reserve fund allocation. Historically, it's been 2.2 to 2.3 million for the last 10 years. With the 500 and credit card fees added to that in this budget, we're at 1.7 million.
So does it make sense to have our dues increase indexed to some sort of market?
Yes, we have to be careful about tying it directly to CPI, because you have years where it's, CPI is less than 1%. So I would set a floor, and then yes, and I think a 3-year look back on the CPI, not just a 1-year look back, but a 3 years. So in those years where CPI like now is going crazy,
right, you're
actually factoring in, it's not point for point, I guess is my point. You're actually getting an average in there. And if we go back to that, sorry, Terry, could you go back to that CPI slide? But you see what $5 does to the modeling. It's $150,000 a year after the first year.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about making up $500,000 in credit card processing fees in this budget, $5 is 150,000 after the first year.
Well,
So
it
$10
seems,
would be 300.
it seems to me we've got two aspects of the budget, obviously. We've got the operating expenses and revenue, and then we've got the capital expenses and revenue, right?
Yes.
If we were to tie the operational expenses to, and it doesn't have to be one for one, but use a CPI, for instance, as a guide.
Mhm.
And then you now have the capital budget allocation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you use that, you could actually plan how much of that you wanted to put into the reserve fund each year.
Absolutely, yes.
So if you use those two things, that would give you a fairly visible method of putting together the dues. Because going back and forth on dues it's cumbersome, and it doesn't really get us anywhere, and we waste a lot of time doing it.
Yes, and we always have to make up for the transgressions that have happened in prior years. So eventually you end up getting there, and that's kind of what this shows. So even if we tied it point for point to CPI, the proposal in 2023 would be $536, where we're proposing $530. All right. If you tie it to the 3-year average, the proposal will be $545. But yes, you could have the baseline, set it at the 3-year average, so to be the baseline or the 3-year average, whichever is greater, and then look at that reserve fund allocation and adjust accordingly up or down.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Could we have some modeling done on that, so if we could look at it at the workshop?
Yes.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Ann?
The workshop will be after the next B&F committee. I'm wondering if that would be available also for B&F to see at our next meeting.
Yes, we can have that available.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the directors about that idea? Roberta?
I was curious, do we in the budget figure out how many single households we have versus 2? Or is that not count in there?
We don't summarize it that way. We just have the total dues paid in the budget,
Okay,
but it's not done by household.
okay.
Okay, any other comments? Harry, you have a comment on this?
I just sat down and said, if we did back to the credit card fees, I just come up with, we passed it on to as Bill had said, it comes back out to everybody in the community. 260,000, 28,000 people, it'd be that ratio of $8 to $9. That was the $10 that he said. So that would be what the dues would increase to cover the golf side of the credit card fees. And what our proposals have been was to pass that on to the golfers rather than everybody. But I can argue both sides of that.
Sure.
Used to being a golfer, that I don't use the swimming pools or anything else. I only use the golf courses. So, I can go vacillate and argue both ways on that, because there are costs that should pass on to everybody because it is an amenity for all, just like the pools, the meeting rooms, and everything else. But yet the golfers also need to pay their share. I believe in that too.
Okay. Any
And
other
they
comments?
have. Golfers have. The rates have gone, for golf have gone up 7 to 8% for the 2 years I've been here, and dues have gone up 0 and 2.4.
Lisa, do you have any comments? Jack? Ann? Kay, do you have any comments on this? All right, we're going to discuss that at our workshop. In fact, Karen, would you add to our workshop agenda, discuss the credit card fees and discuss the using some sort of index? CPI is one. There may be others out there that are more appropriate to a nonprofit such as ourselves. And discuss the dues increase. Because my fear all along has been that, and I'm going to get crucified, but we're not raising the dues enough. So, and I think we need to have an honest discussion about that. Harry?
One other thing, in analyzing the numbers, which I found is on your page 9, full-time equivalents, 10-year trend.
Yes.
If you look at the categories, golf in the last 10 years has went from 149 to 134. So that's decreased 15 full-time equivalents, which is about 10%. If you look at rec, it's decreased 15 full-time equivalents, which is about 11%. Sports pavilion increased 2, which we know what that is. That's probably Lizard Acres. Couple people there. So that's 14%. Admin has increased 12, which is a 30.77%. So I'd like to have a little look at that 30% increase in admin is, to me, is a pretty good sized jump as an
Yeah.
accountant.
So in the administrative department, it's kind of, admin is kind of a catch-all bucket, but what's in there is our GM department, our governing board department, our IT department, facilities maintenance is in admin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, facilities maintenance is admin, HR, and finance. Those are the things that are in admin. And yes, CC and membership and CCNR. So the CCNR department ad has been in there, which wasn't in the past. That was 2 years ago, I believe. Has increased due to that. And then also keep in mind that, you know, as technology increases, as we're looking at things analytically a little bit more than we used to look at things. We were more operational probably 20 years ago than we are now. So, you know, taking a look in those areas, we're able to maybe save in the operational and get through advances in IT and different things. We have to beef up those departments as they advance. So that does happen. But great analysis, and it also speaks to the fact that, you know, it's harder to find laborers now. It just is, because we've been in this trend that go to college, go to college, go to college, and, you know, don't pick up a trade, you know, and that's what we're dealing with.
Okay, any other questions before we move on?
Well, I would like to know why we do not, like, especially for membership use and for tickets and stuff, we don't use ACH. Because that would reduce the amount of the fees.
I think they're in the process of setting that up.
Okay.
We are, yes. Yes, unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do it with member credit. So member credit will still have to be done at membership or at the golf courses. But because we can't do that through the portal, unfortunately, we don't have that ability. But we will have the ability to do ACH for member dues.
Well, the other thing is why you can put money on your rec card and pay for things like golf, and why can't you do it at the bowling alley?
So okay, so the bowling alley uses something, the software we use there is Brunswick Zone, and it's not tied into TEG, which is, it's a separate operating system, so that's why. Fortunately, though, golf is, I think the credit card fees in golf were like $5,100 last year. There's not a lot of credit card transactions I'm sorry, not golf, bowling. But yeah, that's why, though, because it's a separate operating system.
Okay.
That was my question.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Cliff.
You're welcome.
We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is a reminder that the proposed fiscal year 23-24 new capital and R&R items over $50,000 have been identified and need to be individually approved at the 420 meeting. And what we've done in the past, and here is an assignment for everybody, is the list. Karen has put together a list of those items that's on the last page of your packet. If you see an item that you would want to have pulled out of a consent vote, Okay? And basically what we would do is we would have a vote to consent on items in total. Okay? So if you have something you want to pull off to discuss individually, let us know so that we can do that and discuss that at the upcoming workshop also. It's going to be a busy workshop. Okay? Everybody understand? Okay.
What about pickleball?
Yeah. Okay, that concludes our new business director comments. Kay, do you have any comments?
I'd like to give a shout out to the art club. They did a fabulous art show last weekend, put in an amazing amount of hours. They had over 250 paintings, all done by our local residents. I think sometimes we get so busy, we overlook all the talent of the folks that call this community home. And I would just like to acknowledge all the work that they put into that, because it was a very class act, well done, and involved a lot of one-on-one conversation with the artists as well. And I think that's one of our clubs that doesn't get enough recognition. So I just wanted to say hats off to a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kay. Dick? No. No comments? Ann, any comments?
I just want to echo what Kay said and remind people, go to Kuntz and see the display that's up in the Kuntz courtyard right now for the art club. It's fabulous.
Jack? Lisa? Gary? Roberta? Okay, I do have a comment, and that is in the presentation that Cliff gave today, one of the things that he did not mention was all of the cost-saving topics that have been going on. And I think that deserves as much attention as the increases for the different things that we've had. So if you would keep that in mind. All right. I'm going to open it up for member comments. If you would like to make a comment, come up to the board or up to the microphone, give us your name and rec number.
My name is David Miller, 135574. I'm a member of the Budget and Finance Committee, but I'm commenting today as an individual property owner and not for the committee. I'm also a member of the golf community, having played 119 rounds in the last 12 months. Raising the per round golf rates by an additional $1 on a year-round basis to cover the cost of credit card fees has multiple negative consequences, in my opinion. Many players pay for golf with member credit. Bearing the credit card fee and the cost per round removes any incentive to pay for member credit up front with cash or a check. This may actually drive up long-term credit card usage, requiring future round fee increases to cover escalating costs, since there would be no incentive to go the extra effort to fund the member credit account with anything but a credit card. Second, it disproportionately raises the rates on a percentage basis for both Kachina card and Coyote card users relative to the casual non-discount card golfer. Peak season morning play impacts range from 6 to 7% for Coyote cards and 9 to 10% for Kachina cards. Summer season morning play impacts range from 11 to 13% for Coyote cards and 17 to 20% for Kachina cards. Bottom line is that your most frequent loyal golfers are the most negatively impacted. Lastly, it transfers credit card costs to non-credit card users. Unlike the situation with paying members' dues, where credit card fees can be avoided by paying with cash or check, implementing a per round fee increase impacts everyone, regardless of payment method. I would suggest to the board that there's a more equitable solution for our players. Implement a two-tiered pricing model in our point of sale systems for member owners. Establish one price for a round of golf for those paying with a credit card, which includes recovery of credit card fees built into the price. A lower price would be charged for those paying with cash, check, or member credit. Such a system maintains the convenience and rewards of using a credit card for those that wish to do so without imposing additional costs on the non-credit card users. We already have discount pricing models through our various golf carts built into our point of sale systems. The implementation of the two-tier cash versus credit pricing model would simply be another version of discount pricing.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Good morning. Lynn Kellis, 129120. I have a couple of comments to make. One is, of course, regarding the golf and not charging our outside guests as we do our membership. It seems to me that some things work well if you just add a percentage on and raise your prices. You're going to the grocery store, they take care of the Visa charge that way. But with golf, it's not right that our members have to pay and they don't. I'm sorry, I know, Harry, if maybe you can explain to me, what is the difference between our prices on our golf course and the other ones? I'm hearing they're $20 and $30 difference. I don't think that if we added an administration charge or bank fee or whatever at the register for those people who are paying by Visa, that is going to detour those people from coming here. And basically, that's, you know, the way I feel is we all have to pay our part. It's really sad to see, well, let's add more on to our yearly payments, or let's add more on here. If we all have to pay the same thing, we're doing it outside all day long, every day, everywhere we go. You just don't know it. I guarantee you that all the other stores that are out there using Visa aren't doing it for free. So that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other comments? Okay. Our next meeting is on April 14th, 9 o'clock in the morning here in the lecture hall. I'm sorry, that's the workshop. And the regular governing board meeting is April 20th at 9 o'clock here in the lecture hall. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 10:22. Thank you very much.